Have you ever felt like the entire world was moving forward, leaving you completely behind? That is the exact reality for Jaxson. In the magnificent high-tech fortress city of Neo-Aegis, life isn't measured by your character, your kindness, or how hard you work. It is measured by a single cold number projected into the air, your aura score. For generations, this grand city has stood as a beacon of hope, protected by massive, shimmering plasma walls that keep the mysterious, wandering creatures of the outer dimensions at bay. To the citizens of Neo-Aegis, the brave protectors who guard these walls are absolute heroes, and every single youth dreams of the day they turn 21, the day of the global awakening ceremony, where the city's ancient, crystalline pillar reads your soul and grants you your permanent class. Jaxson sat quietly in the crowded stadium, feeling like a ghost inside his own skin. He wasn't originally from this world. 3 years ago, a strange twist of fate had brought his soul from Earth into the body of this quiet, hard-working orphan. He had spent years learning the intricate rules of this advanced society, blending into the shadows, and working part-time jobs just to get by. Right beside him was Mason, his absolute best friend since childhood. Mason was 22, a warm-hearted, boisterous guy who was currently shaking so hard he almost dropped his water bottle. "This is it, Jaxson," Mason whispered, his voice cracking with pure anxiety. "If I don't get a good combat class today, my family stays in the lower districts forever. Everything rides on this." Jaxson offered a gentle, reassuring smile, placing a steady hand on his friend's trembling shoulder. "Relax, man. You've trained harder than anyone I know. Trust the process." Suddenly, a resonant musical chime echoed across the massive stadium, silencing tens of thousands of spectators. The senior academy director stepped onto the central platform, gesturing toward a magnificent, black obsidian pedestal pulsing with gentle, starlight energy. One by one, students walked up, touched the core, and watched their futures materialize in bright holographic letters. When Mason's name was called, he took a deep, shuddering breath and stepped forward. The moment his palms brushed the stone, a brilliant, warm amber light erupted from the pedestal. The director's voice boomed through the speakers, "Class, Vanguard. Aura rating, B9." The crowd erupted into joyous cheers. Mason looked back at Jaxson, his face lighting up with a massive, tearful grin, pumping his fist in the air. He had made it. He was officially a protector. Then, the stadium fell into an expectant lull as the speaker read the next name, Jaxson Vance. Jaxson exhaled slowly, smoothing down his jacket as he walked down the long stone steps. He didn't want glory, he just wanted a stable, decent class so he could build a quiet life alongside his friend. He placed his hand on the smooth, cool surface of the obsidian core. For a long, agonizing moment, the crystal remained completely dark. Then, a dim, flicking gray light pulsed weakly, almost like a dying candle. The holographic letters materialized, cold and unyielding, class, Scavenger. Aura rating, E1. An absolute, suffocating silence gripped the stadium, followed instantly by a wave of cruel, mocking laughter. An E1 Scavenger was the absolute lowest, most fragile rating in the entire history of Neo-Aegis. In a world that valued raw power, a scavenger was considered nothing more than a glorified janitor, a low-tier laborer destined to clean up scrap metal and debris in the wake of real heroes. Jaxson could see the deep pity in Mason's eyes, and the dismissive, bored look on the director's face as he motioned for him to step down. To the world, Jackson's life was effectively over before it even began. But as Jaxson took his first step off the platform, a sudden, breathtaking warmth bloomed right in the center of his chest. The loud laughter of the stadium completely faded into distant static as a gentle, melodic, yet unmistakably mechanical voice echoed clearly inside his mind. System initialization initiated. Temporal data anomaly detected. Connecting to host. Connection successful. Overclock multiplier bound. Jaxson froze, his eyes widening in astonishment as a beautiful translucent blue interface appeared only to him. Qui lut kot loi activated. The universe rewards those who endure. All acquired experience, currency and item qualities permanently granted an overclock multiplier of 250x. Before he could even process the sheer magnitude of what he was reading, another soft chime sounded in his ears. Welcome package delivered to host inventory, 5 raw energy shards. Instantly, a golden notification flashed across the screen, pulsing with brilliant light. Overclock multiplier triggered. 5 shards multiplied by 250. Host receives 1,250 high-grade energy crystals. Jaxson instinctively slipped his hand into his jacket pocket, and his heart skipped a beat. He could feel the unmistakable, heavy warmth of highly concentrated energy crystals tightly packed inside. In Neo-Aegis, a single high-grade crystal was worth a fortune, enough to buy a comfortable house in the pristine inner districts. He had just received an amount that an elite, veteran though San would have to toil for 5 years to accumulate, all from a simple starter package. Looking back at the crowded stadium, hearing the lingering snickers of the students who thought he was nothing, Jaxson couldn't help but let a soft, quiet smile play on his lips. They thought they had just witnessed the creation of the Academy's weakest link. They had no idea that a beautiful cosmic glitch had just handed a gentle soul the keys to absolute, limitless potential, and the grand game of life had only just begun. The bright morning sun spilled through the windows of the Neo-Aegis transit station, but the atmosphere inside was heavy with unspoken fear. Mason stood directly in front of Jaxson, his hands gripping his friend's shoulders with a desperate, iron-like intensity. "Jaxson, please, just listen to me for 1 second," Mason begged, his eyes wide with genuine concern. "You don't have to do this. I just got accepted into a mid-tier guild. I can talk to my commander. We can find you a safe, stable job sorting scrap metal at the inner-city recycling depots. It pays well enough, and you'll be completely safe behind the plasma walls. Going out to Sector 9 as an E-rank scavenger is pure madness." Jaxson looked at his best friend, deeply moved by the fierce loyalty in Mason's voice. He placed his hand over Mason's, offering a gentle, calming squeeze. "I know you're looking out for me, brother," Jaxson said softly, his voice steady and reassuring. "But I didn't come to this world just to hide behind walls. I need to know what I'm truly capable of." With a determined breath, Jaxson stepped past his protesting friend and walked directly up to the digital registration terminal. The automated system blinked with a stark, crimson warning, requiring him to sign a standard death waiver, a mandatory requirement for any low-ranking civilian venturing into the unpredictable wilderness. Without a single second of hesitation, Jaxson pressed his palm against the scanner, finalizing his enrollment in the upcoming Rookie Vanguard expedition. Confidence without strength isn't bravery, Scavenger. It is simply a tragedy waiting to happen. The voice that cut through the crowded terminal was as sharp and cold as pristine ice. Jaxson turned to see Valerie standing just a few feet away. At 22 years old, she was the Academy's undisputed prodigy, a striking figure dressed in immaculate, custom-tailored silver armor that bore the crest of the elite A1 Sovereign Knight class. She looked down at Jaxson with an expression of detached disappointment, her arms crossed elegantly over her breastplate. "I reviewed the expedition roster," Valerie continued, her tone dismissive yet strangely pragmatic. "Sector 9 is a volatile zone. By signing that waiver, you aren't just endangering your own life, you are turning yourself into dead weight that the Vanguard will have to protect. Do yourself a favor and go back to the city." Jaxson didn't get angry. Instead, he simply smiled politely, acknowledging her practical logic with a respectful nod. "Thank you for the advice, Valerie," he replied calmly. "But sometimes, a man must step into the storm to find his true limits." Valerie scoffed softly, turning her back on him as she walked toward the elite waiting lounge. "Do what you want. Just don't expect anyone to carry you back when reality hits." Rather than collecting the standard-issue low-grade iron dagger provided by the Academy Bureau, Jaxson took a quiet detour through the bustling, neon-lit alleys of the lower district black market. He needed a weapon, but more importantly, he needed to keep a low profile. He didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention to his hidden wealth. Stopping by a dusty, cluttered equipment stall, his eyes locked onto a discarded, broken iron sword resting in a bargain bin. It was heavily rusted, the hilt was frayed, and its tip was completely snapped off. The vendor looked at him with amusement. 10 credits and it's yours, kid. Though it's better suited as a paperweight." Jaxson happily transferred the 10 credits, picked up the heavy, unappealing piece of metal, and headed back to his quiet apartment. Later that evening, inside the peaceful sanctuary of his small, dimly lit room, Jaxson sat cross-legged on the edge of his bed. The broken sword lay across his lap. He took a deep breath, cleared his mind, and silently opened his translucent system interface. With a gentle tap of his finger, he moved the rusted iron sword into his hidden system inventory. Instantly, time seemed to slow to an absolute crawl. A beautiful golden notification flared brilliantly in his field of vision. Overclock Multiplier detected a base-quality item. Initiating 250X Evolution Protocol. What followed next was a breathtaking masterpiece of cosmic craftsmanship. Jaxson watched in utter fascination as the system didn't just multiply the item, it completely rewrote its genetic code. The heavy orange rust on the blade began to peel away into the air, dissolving like beautiful, glowing stardust. The jagged, broken tip of the sword began to grow, extending outward as liquid crystalline metal forged itself seamlessly in midair. A deep hypnotic hum vibrated through the quiet room as the weapon's metal shifted from ordinary iron into a magnificent, flawless hack thatch, a deep, pure obsidian that seemed to actively swallow the ambient lamplight, creating a mesmerizing void of absolute darkness within the room. Delicate, intricate golden runes spontaneously etched themselves along the center of the newly formed broadsword, pulsing with a warm, rhythmic light that felt like a calm, sleeping heartbeat. Jaxson extended his hand and gripped the newly leather-wrapped hilt. The moment his fingers closed around it, a wave of profound, stabilizing energies surged up his arm, making the heavy weapon feel as light as a feather. He pulled up the item's new status panel, and his breath caught in his throat. Weapon, Obsidian Doombringer. Quality, Ancient Tier, Unique. Physical damage, plus 310. Passive effect, 100% armor-shattering bypass, ignores all natural defenses. Jaxson stared at the glowing golden runes of the magnificent blade, a profound sense of awe washing over him. A standard-issue rookie weapon provided a mere plus 8 damage, yet this beautifully evolved masterpiece granted a staggering plus 310. He gently sheathed the obsidian blade, sliding it into a simple leather scabbard to hide its majestic glow. Looking out his window at the distant, towering plasma walls of Neo Aegis, the heavy weight of apprehension completely vanished from his heart, replaced by an exhilarating spark of anticipation. The wilderness was waiting, and for the very first time, Jaxson was completely ready to face it. The heavy mechanical rumble of the city's eastern gates echoed across the threshold as the rookie Vanguard expedition stepped into the vast, untouched wilderness of Sector 9. The sun filtered gently through a towering canopy of giant, bioluminescent trees, casting a soft, dappled emerald light across the forest floor. Leading the 50-man rookie squad was Captain Garrick, a 35-year-old veteran hunter whose weathered face and sturdy leather armor bore the honorable marks of a lifetime spent protecting Neo Aegis. "Stay alert, keep your formations tight, and do exactly what you're told," Garrick commanded, his deep, grounding voice keeping the nervous rookies moving forward. Jaxson marched quietly at the very back of the formation, his simple leather-bound obsidian sword blending perfectly with his modest gear. Right ahead of him, Mason kept his shield raised high, his eyes scanning the beautiful yet unpredictable woodland with intense focus. The serene silence of the forest was suddenly broken by a soft rustling in the tall, swaying ferns. Before the front line could react, a pack of shadowstalkers, graceful, panther-like creatures shimmering with a dark, velvet-like energy, glided out from the brush. The sudden appearance of the majestic beasts threw the inexperienced rookies into a wave of panicked shouting, many of them fumbling with their weapons. Sensing the danger, an advanced B-rank hunter positioned near the center line moved with fluid precision, drawing a glowing bow string and swiftly neutralizing a minor beast at the edge of the thicket to restore order. Because Jaxson was registered as part of the official expedition party, a tiny, translucent notification quietly popped up at the edge of his vision, nearby party kill detected. Shared experience granted, 2 EXP. Instantly, the golden overclock system flared to life in his mind with a joyous chime, multiplier activated. 2 EXP multiplied by 250. Host receives 500 EXP. A sudden warm wave of pure energy cascaded down Jackson's spine, so intense and revitalizing that he had to catch his breath. In a single fraction of a second, his level bar filled up and reset over and over again, rocketing his status directly from level 1 to level 5. Congratulations, host. Milestone reached. Unlocking unique Scavenger-class skill, debris extraction. Jaxson smiled inwardly, knowing that for a normal scavenger, this skill merely allowed them to lift heavy scrap metal slightly faster. But the system wasn't done. Overclocking skill data. Evolution successful. Debris extraction has permanently evolved into Gigatitan's aura, passive. Jackson's eyes widened as the description materialized. The passive ability instantly multiplied his core muscle density, skeletal durability, and physical lifting strength by a staggering 10 times. He could feel his senses sharpening to a razor edge, and a profound, unshakable weight settled deep into his core, making him feel as solid and unyielding as a mountain, even though his outward appearance remained completely unchanged. Just as he was adapting to this incredible internal metamorphosis, a thunderous rumble shook the ground. A level 5 Gorgonboar, a massive, majestic creature covered in magnificent, razor-sharp bone plates that gleamed like polished marble, burst from the deeper thicket. The creature, startled by the shouting crowd, locked its gaze onto the shiny amber shield of Mason and charged forward like a runaway freight train. Form a wall. Tank classes step up. Garrick roared from the far right flank, desperately sprinting across the uneven terrain, but the sheer distance made it physically impossible for the veteran captain to intercept the charging beast in time. Mason braced his feet, his face turning pale as the massive armored creature closed the distance in a heartbeat. Jaxson moved purely on instinct. He didn't draw his obsidian blade, he didn't need to. Stepping fluidly in front of his frozen best friend, Jaxson met the charging Gorgonboar head-on. As the creature reached him, Jaxson concentrated the immense, sleeping power of the Gigatitan's aura into his right leg. With perfect, calm precision, He brought his foot down in a single decisive stomp directly onto the crown of the beast's armored head. Boom! A shocking, resonant shockwave rippled through the clearing. The sheer, overwhelming physical force of the impact stopped the massive boar dead in its tracks, instantly driving its heavy skull clean into the dirt. The earth beneath Jaxson's boot splintered beautifully, cobwebbing outward in deep, geometric fractures across the soil. The great beast didn't even cry out, it simply slumped forward, completely incapacitated and defeated by a single effortless show of absolute gravity. An absolute, breathless silence swallowed the entire forest clearing. The 50 rookies stood frozen in their tracks, their weapons lowering as they stared in total, unblinking disbelief at the scene. Jaxson calmly retracted his foot, casually brushing a bit of dust off his boot, looking completely unfazed. Captain Garrick stopped dead in his tracks a few yards away, his heavy steel sword slipping slightly in his grip. For a seasoned battle veteran who had fought alongside the city's finest defenders for 20 years, what he was looking at defied all known logic of the world. His heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear of the K-Vat, but from pure, unadulterated confusion. He stared at Jaxson's E-rank scavenger badge, then at the shattered earth, and back to the calm young man. A single staggering realization echoed through the captain's mind. The raw, terrifying physical output Jaxson had just displayed wasn't the strength of a rookie scavenger. It was the unmistakable, earth-shaking power of a level 20 heavy Vanguard tank class. And as Jaxson offered a small, apologetic smile to his stunned captain, Garrick knew the academy had completely misread the soul of the young man standing before him. The awestruck silence of the clearing eventually faded, replaced by a tense, hushed reverence as the squad continued their march deeper into the heart of Sector 9. The emerald light of the upper canopy gradually gave way to a dense, mist-shrouded valley where the very air felt thick with ancient energy. Before Captain Garrick could signal a halt, the temperature plummeted drastically, and a sudden unnatural gust of wind swirled frost through the trees. The team had inadvertently stepped directly into the sanctuary of a regional boss, the Goliath bear. Emerged from the fog, the creature stood a towering 12 feet tall, its magnificent form covered in a dense, calcified hide that shimmered like polished white quartz. Mages, unleash full elemental payload. Fire and lightning. Garrick roared, instantly raising his heavy shield. Valerie stepped forward with elegant speed, her silver armor gleaming as she channeled her advanced Sovereign Knight abilities, sending a cascade of brilliant, localized frost spikes and blazing energy beams crashing into the beast. But as the magic struck, the calcified hide merely pulsed with a pale light, completely absorbing and reflecting the elemental forces back into the forest. The attacks bounced off fruitlessly. With a powerful, sweeping motion of its massive arm, the Goliath bear shattered the defensive line. Valerie moved to parry, but the sheer kinetic force of the boss crushed her defenses. Her exquisite silver sword shattered into a dozen glittering fragments, and she was thrown backward into the snow, grievously wounded and breathless, her pride and her weapon broken in an instant. Amidst the swirling snow, kicked-up dust, and the desperate cries of the scattered rookies, Jaxson calmly stepped forward. The time for hiding his true capabilities had passed. His friend and his squad were in danger. He reached behind his back and firmly gripped the hilt of the obsidian Doombringer. As the blade slid smoothly from its simple scabbard, the intricate golden runes along the dark hack thatch metal flared with a brilliant, majestic warmth, instantly cutting through the icy mist. Jaxson concentrated the full roaring power of his Gigatitan's aura, infusing his muscles with undeniable physical force, and met the charging Goliath bear. As the giant beast raised its massive paws to crush him, Jaxson executed a single, silent horizontal slash. The unique, ancient property of the blade activated seamlessly, a 100% armor-shattering bypass that completely ignored all natural, calcified defenses. The dark edge split the air in a perfect fluid arc, cleaving the massive Goliath bear cleanly in half. The giant creature simply dissolved into a harmless shower of sparkling, translucent energy particles that gently blanketed the forest floor. Instantly, Jaxson's vision was completely flooded by a brilliant explosion of golden system notifications. Regional boss defeated. Base experience granted, 5000 EXP. Overclock Multiplier activated. 5000 multiplied by 250. Host receives 1,250,000 EXP. The sheer magnitude of the experience rainfall felt like a warm, comforting storm rushing through his veins. His level display blinked frantically, thrumming with raw power as it rocketed straight from level 5 past level 10, past level 15, finally stabilizing at an unbelievable level 18. Jaxson gently sheathed his sword, the golden runes dimming back to a quiet, resting heartbeat. He walked over to Valerie and offered a warm, steady hand to help her up. She stared up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of profound shock and newfound respect, completely speechless. However, a new and unexpected tension was already brewing. High above the tree line, A small scouting drone belonging to a traumatized rookie had captured the entire battle, instantly broadcasting the unbelievable footage of an E-rank scavenger one-shotting a regional boss straight back to the central networks of Neo Aegis. By the time the expedition group marched back through the massive plasma gates of the city, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Waiting right in the center of the academy courtyard was Damien. At 23 years old, Damien was the city's undisputed greatest prodigy, an S-rank Dread Knight at level 35 who wore heavy dark-rimmed armor that radiated authority. The surrounding crowd of students stepped back in fear as Damien locked his sharp, calculating eyes onto Jaxson. Without a single word, Damien deliberately released a crushing, suffocating aura of focused killing intent, a heavy psychological pressure meant to force Jaxson to his knees. An E-rank scavenger does not possess this kind of power, Damien spoke, his voice echoing coldly across the courtyard. Tell me what illegal external modifications you are using, or which rogue high-level faction is backing you, before I remove you from this academy myself. The pressure was enough to make ordinary students faint, but Jaxson refused to flinch. Standing perfectly upright, he looked directly into the eyes of the city's apex prodigy and gently released a mere fraction of his newly acquired Titan's aura. A subtle warm ripple of invisible force radiated outward from Jaxson, instantly shattering Damien's suffocating pressure like brittle glass. The sudden counterforce caused Damien's eyes to widen, his boots shifting back a fraction of an inch in sheer surprise. Jaxson offered a calm, effortless smile, his voice quiet yet carrying clearly to everyone in the courtyard. I don't answer to you, Damien. If you're so curious about my strength, keep your eyes on the arena. We will settle this properly at the Academy's death tournament next week. Turning away with absolute grace, Jaxson left the stunned prodigies standing in the center of a completely silent crowd, the countdown to their inevitable clash officially ticking away. The confrontational energy of the Academy courtyard eventually dissipated, leaving Jaxson with a burning need to handle his rapidly expanding inventory. Stepping away from the glaring eyes of the public, he navigated his way down into the neon-drenched lower sectors of Neo Aegis, eventually entering a hidden, underground black market pawn shop known to the locals as the Iron Vault. The air inside was warm, humming with the gentle buzz of ancient server stacks and the quiet chatter of high-stakes traders. Behind a reinforced carbon glass counter sat an old, bearded vendor who didn't care about ranks, only results. Jaxson calmly stepped up and placed the shimmering, pristine core of the Goliath bear onto the counter, alongside several pieces of high-end tactical gear he had legally scavenged from the desolate forest floor. The old vendor's eyes widened to the size of saucers. He tapped his scanner, his hands trembling slightly. The pristine core of a regional boss, and surgically extracted. Incredible. The actual face value for this entire haul is 40,000 cyber credits, kid. A massive sum. Jaxson simply nodded, keeping his expression neutral as he linked his hunter identification card to the terminal. The moment the transaction was initiated, Jackson's internal system interface flared to life, superimposing itself over the shop's digital network. Financial transaction detected. Overclock Multiplier activated. In a staggering display of cosmic accounting, the base payout of 40,000 cyber credits was instantly subjected to the 250x amplification rule. The numbers on Jackson's personal screen glitched and spun at a blinding speed, inflating the payout to an astronomical, breathtaking 100 million cyber credits. The old vendor blinked, looking at his own monitor which still safely displayed a standard deduction, completely unaware that the universe itself had just minted a secret financial whale right in front of him. Jaxson quietly pocketed his card, feeling a profound sense of relief washing over him. He was no longer just an orphan trying to survive, he held the wealth of an entire elite guild in the palm of his hand. His very first act of financial freedom was one of pure, unselfish warmth. Using a series of encrypted, anonymous proxy accounts, Jaxson quietly bought out the entire residential apartment complex where Mason and his family lived, immediately zeroing out their rent and upgrading the building's plasma defense grids to ensure his best friend's absolute safety. Furthermore, he commissioned a state-of-the-art, custom-tailored Epic-tier Vanguard Aegis armor set, arranging for it to be delivered straight to Mason's doorstep via an untraceable anonymous courier, smiling as he imagined his friend's ecstatic, confused reaction. Later that evening, seeking a quiet place to test the true upper limits of his level 18 strength, Jaxson descended into the abandoned, subterranean transit tunnels beneath Sector 9. The tunnels were vast and peaceful, home only to glowing moss and nests of plague rats, docile, oversized rodents that possessed dense, stone-like armor plates on their backs. Jaxson moved through the shadows like a gentle breeze, testing his fluid movements and striking the armored pests with effortless precision. With each minor victory, the experience poured in, and within an hour, a brilliant chime echoed in his mind as he officially crossed the threshold into level 20. Suddenly, a profound, vibrant tremor rippled through Jackson's entire consciousness. The blue holographic interface before his eyes began to fracture into brilliant cascades of golden code, pulsing so rapidly that the air around him hummed with static electricity. Warning: host has reached the level 20 breakthrough threshold. The sheer influx of compressed latent data has triggered a systemic bottleneck. Overclock system initiating system singularity protocol. Jaxson held his breath, leaning against the cool stone wall as a wave of soothing, celestial warmth enveloped his body. Reconstitution complete. The glitched multiplier has broken past its cosmic constraints. The permanent amplification rule has permanently mutated from 250x to an absolute, staggering 5000X amplification. Jaxson stared at the new number in absolute, breathless wonder. To test the reality of this reality-bending upgrade, he looked down and spotted a tiny, level 1 mutated iridescent beetle crawling harmlessly near his boot. With a gentle flick of his finger, he neutralized the insect. The system chimed instantly, and a common heavily rusted iron dagger dropped onto the stone floor. Jaxson leaned down and picked up the discarded scrap. The very moment his fingers brushed the rusted metal, the 5000X permanent evolution protocol slammed into the weapon like a thunderbolt. Jaxson watched in utter, rapturous awe as the rusted iron completely dissolved into thin air, replaced by a magnificent fluid metal that resembled liquid starlight. The blade extended and widened, shifting into a breathtaking weapon of pure mythical tier, the Void-Eater Blade. The weapon didn't just shine, it actively interacted with the fabric of reality itself. Along the edge of the sleek, cosmic black blade, a visible distortion in the air materialized. Jaxson gasped softly as he felt the atmospheric pressure change in the room. The mythical blade was actively warping local gravity, drawing in the floating dust motes and bending the ambient neon light into a swirling miniature black hole that hovered safely and beautifully just above the center of his open palm. The weapon felt completely weightless to him, yet it radiated an undeniable, absolute authority that could reshape the world. Jaxson gently closed his fist, silencing the cosmic distortion, a sharp, exhilarating thrill coursing through his veins. He was no longer just ahead of the game. He was playing by a set of rules that the world of Neo Aegis couldn't even begin to comprehend, and the upcoming tournament was about to become an unforgettable spectacle. The next morning, the grand halls of the Neo Aegis Academy buzzed with lectures on standard tactics and baseline resource management. Choosing to skip these mundane theory classes, Jaxson quietly slipped out of the city gates alone. He had a much grander classroom in mind. Traveling far past the standard rookie sectors, he arrived at the edge of the Dead Valley, a massive mist-shrouded canyon quarantined by high-voltage energy pylons. This desolate gorge was home to millions of vampire crows, majestic but overwhelming level 3 avian creatures that flew in synchronized, undulating clouds. Professional hunter teams strictly avoided this zone. The crows were simply too numerous to fight traditionally, and they yielded a pathetically low reward of only 5 experience points per kill. For any ordinary hunter, the math made no sense. But for Jaxson, the hidden math of the universe was entirely different. 5 base experience points multiplied by his newly mutated 5000X multiplier became a staggering 25,000 experience points for a single crow. Standing boldly on a desolate, wind-swept cliffside overlooking the vast expanse of the valley, Jaxson took a deep, grounding breath. He reached down and unsheathed the mythical Void-Eater Blade. The moment the dark, cosmic metal cleared the scabbard, the air around him rippled beautifully, bending the ambient sunlight into soft, swirling halos. As the first massive storm cloud of crows noticed his presence and began to sweep across the canyon like a living wave of midnight silk, Jaxson calmly raised his weapon. With a fluid, graceful swing, he unleashed the mythical blade's reality-warping properties. Every elegant stroke of his sword threw out silent, miniature dimensional rifts into the sky, soft, shimmering folds in space that gently and cleanly swallowed entire flocks of crows at once, returning them peacefully back into the raw energy of the atmosphere. What followed was a breathtaking, rhythmic dance of cosmic efficiency. Slaying over 5,000 crows in a focused 3-hour session, Jaxson transformed the desolate canyon into a beautiful theater of ascending light. The sheer, overwhelming volume of experience points cascading into his consciousness accumulated to over 120 million points. Suddenly, the translucent blue interface before his eyes began to spark with brilliant golden light. The system's visual notifications completely crashed under the immense weight of the data influx, the digital text dissolving into a warm, swirling vortex of celestial numbers. A profound, thrumming wave of pure physical evolution washed over Jackson's entire body, strengthening his bones, sharpening his perception to an absolute pinpoint, and filling his veins with a tranquil yet unyielding power. The system frantically updated his status, forcing his level past level 30, past level 40, and finally settling at an unbelievable level 45. Jaxson slowly lowered his blade, exhaling a long, peaceful breath as the valley returned to a quiet, serene stillness. At just 21 years old, his raw physical and mental statistics had quietly scaled to rival the legendary fortress generals and academy directors who had guarded the nation for half a century. He was now a walking titan disguised as a student. Realizing that walking back into the academy with this level of overwhelming cosmic energy would cause absolute panic and ruin his peaceful life, Jaxson calmly opened the system's integrated marketplace. Spending a small fraction of his massive credit fortune, he purchased a rare, passive item known as the Concealment Veil. The moment he equipped it, a gentle, soothing translucent current wrapped around his shoulders, instantly suppressing his massive, planet-shaking outer aura back down to a modest, believable level 10. Ready and perfectly balanced, Jaxson turned back toward the distant, glowing spires of Neo Aegis, a quiet, knowing smile on his face. The grand stage of the Academy tournament was set for tomorrow, and the world had absolutely no idea who was about to step into the light. The morning of the Academy Grand Tournament arrived with a majestic flair, flooding the massive hypertech stadium of Neo Aegis with brilliant, sweeping spotlights and the roaring cheers of tens of thousands of spectators. High-definition holoscreens broadcasted the matches globally, attracting high-ranking military officials, legendary warlords, and wealthy guild leaders from the capital cities, all looking to scout the next generation of defenders. Yet, amidst the intense glamour and high-stakes drama, Jaxson remained a calm harbor in the storm. Step by step, match by match, he entered the Golden Sand Arena under his suppressed level 10 aura. Every arrogant A-rank and S-rank prodigy placed in front of him, individuals who had mocked his E-rank Scavenger status just days prior, was systematically obliterated with effortless, single-strike victories. He didn't use flashy spells or earth-shattering movements. Instead, he relied on simple, flawless parries and gentle taps of his blade that sent his opponents sliding gracefully out of bounds, perfectly maintaining his hidden overpower status while leaving the elite scouts scratching their heads in absolute fascination. The grand finals finally arrived, and a suffocating excitement gripped the stadium as Jaxson stepped onto the central platform to face Damien, the undefeated S-rank Dread Knight. Damien gripped his dark broadsword, his eyes burning with intense rivalry. But just as the referee raised his hand to signal the start of the match, the brilliant stadium lights suddenly flickered and died. A profound low-frequency hum vibrated through the stone floor, and the once clear blue sky above the open-air arena turned a sudden, violent crimson. The air grew thick and heavy as space itself began to fracture. High above the stadium, a massive swirling vortex of cracked dimensional energy tore open. A Cataclysm-class Rift, a terrifying celestial event unprecedented in 50 years of Neo Aegis history. The crowd erupted into panicked shouting as the majestic, glowing silhouettes of ancient, titanic beasts began to materialize within the bleeding rift. To suppress the catastrophic breach before the entire fortress city could be swept away, the ultimate guardian of the Western Coalition arrived. Dropping directly from the upper atmosphere like a golden meteor, General Vance descended. At 45 years old, Vance was a living legend, a National Paragon, and a level 210 Dragon Slayer. The moment his heavy dragon-scaled boots touched the earth, his mere presence released an absolute, planet-shaking gravitational pressure. The sheer weight of his aura was so immense that tens of thousands of terrified students, guild masters, and even the arrogant Damien were instantly forced to their knees, their bodies trembling in deep, involuntary submission to the living god. However, amidst the sea of kneeling people, General Vance noticed one glaring anomaly. Standing perfectly upright in the dead center of the arena, completely unfazed by the level 210 pressure, was Jaxson. His stance was completely relaxed, his hand gently resting on the hilt of the Void-Eater Blade, which was humming with a rhythmic, excited golden pulse that beautifully matched the crimson sky. Ignoring Damien, ignoring the academy directors, and ignoring the thousands of elite hunters bowing around him, General Vance stepped forward. With a single, earth-shaking stride, the legendary Paragon dropped from his floating platform, landing heavily directly in front of Jaxson. Vance's sharp, golden eyes locked onto the young man, a profound look of sudden realization and deep respect crossing his weathered features. Vance extended a massive gauntlet hand toward Jaxson, his deep voice carrying an undeniable weight. "You don't belong in this sandbox, kid. Join my central command today, and I will hand you the absolute leadership of an entire elite legion." Jaxson looked up at the bleeding, majestic rift swirling in the heavens, listening to the magnificent hum of the dimensional currents. Then, he turned his calm, brilliant gaze back to the level 210 living god standing before him, and cracked a sharp, confident smile. "Join your legion? Tell me, General, when I inevitably surpass your level by next month, who exactly takes orders from whom?" The video abruptly cuts to black on the profound, wide-eyed shock freezing the general's face, accompanied by the deafening, majestic roar of a cataclysmic beast stepping through the rift.